Going to be joined here in a second by our most esteemed Meadowlark advisor and also Pablo Torre and also Mike Schur at some point. But Jemele Hill is going to be with us to talk about an assortment of things inside and outside of the media. But before I do that, I've just sent a text to Jemele and Pablo, and I sent it to Jeremy as well because I'm like, is this artificial intelligence? Is this real, or am I being butt cracked with this video that I don't think anyone is talking about? Jeremy, would you be so kind? I don't know if Jessica has seen this, and I don't know if Chris Cody has seen this, but will you just show them in real time what I texted Pablo and Jemele? Because it's not something I've ever seen in an NFL game, and it happened so quickly on the field that I can't believe it's real, and I'm in the middle of this week talking about Lamar Jackson some without talking about a play from that game where he threw the ball to Zay Flowers.
This is great podcasting. Jeremy right now is showing Jessica his phone.
Yes, but Jessica, and now come over here and show Chris Cody as well, because I want to see.
Now Jeremy's walking over.
Yes.
I'm not going to lie. Didn't expect that to be what the video was about.
Yeah, right? All right, let me see. Lamar Jackson doing something wacky.
It's Lamar Jackson dropping.
I thought it was going to be like a robot person doing something weird.
It might as well have been, because really I'm surprised
he's not a lefty. Why'd he back up lefty?
He dropped back to pass with his left arm, turned his back to where it is that he would be throwing it, and then swung back around to throw the ball right-handed. And it's simply not something I had ever seen in a football game before. I know Patrick Mahomes has thrown the ball, flipped it left-handed, behind his back, all sorts of shit, but I've never seen that.
That's why he should be the MVP this season and also should not play on Sunday. And also the Ravens really just should forfeit that game.
That's
they
right.
should not play anyone in
Could
that
it
game.
be that it was an accident?
Nah, that looked pretty quarterback-y to me.
Well, let's get into this with Pablo Torre and Jemele Hill, because Lamar Jackson's not going to get the commercials, doesn't really have an agent, and I'm not sure as a player, we've seen many players like him, but also as a face and voice for a franchise, he's a different look and sound than all the quarterbacks who get the commercials. And I'm talking about white and black. I'm talking about Lamar Jackson sounds, talks, thinks, swaggers differently than most of the quarterbacks I'm watching. So, Jemele, let's start with you here. Your assessment so far of that quarterback and that team, given that at one point, 6-time Executive of the Year, Bill Polian told us that was a wide receiver, not the MVP of the league, followed by every loser in the league rushing this offseason to tell us they didn't want the MVP of the league as their quarterback. And thank you for joining us, by the way.
No, always good to be with you all. It's been a while. And of course, as the resident race lady, I can't wait to chime in on all the beautiful topics that I know you have in store for me. But I think and this is why Lamar Jackson, he reminds me so much of Allen Iverson. And Allen Iverson had a lot of the same elements that Lamar Jackson has. He had the cool, he had the swag, he was different, he had tattoos, he had cornrows, and culturally, he was the people's champ, and that is Lamar Jackson. And so there's a lot of people, especially a lot of Black people, who culturally very much identify and relate to Lamar Jackson. But for a lot of boardrooms, for a lot of marketing firms, for a lot of those people who make those kind of fancy decisions, Lamar Jackson is not their cup of tea. He ain't gonna be getting a Campbell's soup commercial with his mama anytime soon. And that's the shame of kind of all of this, really, is that he's a cultural phenomenon that deserves to be elevated and celebrated, especially considering what he was up against from college on, this perception that he is somehow not doing it the real way, the right way, the way that quarterbacking or quarterbacking should be done. And so what we're witnessing now, to me, is Lamar not just defying what the perceptions are, but Lamar also sort of jamming everybody in their face with all of the things that they said should be detractions. And it's a beautiful thing to see, because often in sports, we don't get to see these kinds of things, but he is making so many people look so stupid on a weekly basis that the petty part of me that lives and thrives loves every moment of this, even though he totally destroyed my team, the 49ers.
Well, Dan, I want to point out the nice race lady brings up a good point here. that there is something really fun about Lamar Jackson. Remember, it reminds me of, remember there's that story like 8 years ago where like that mom wrote that letter to the Charlotte Observer about Cam Newton and like all the thrusts and all of the celebrating. Like Lamar Jackson is doing that, not just to former award-winning GMs, but to like analysts right now as he is in the middle of an obvious MVP season. And so part of the fun of Lamar Jackson is that there are all of these people who still like put a rake out in front of them in the middle of their yard, turn a camera on and jump on it with both feet so it hits them in the face, allowing us to feel like honestly edgier than we deserve. Because I agree that Lamar should be celebrated more. Part of the pleasure, though, the perverse, guilty pleasure of being a Lamar Jackson appreciator is that you realize how angry other people are getting because he's so good. And it's just like, how long do we get to do this for? Like the guy is Princess Briding a drop back. Like, oh, you thought I was left-handed? It's like, well, even the defenders are like, yeah, this is like PhD level quarterbacking.
Forgive me here for the correction publicly.
Is this the point? Sorry, Dan, to interrupt, but this is the point in the conversation where I tell people I've never seen The Princess Bride, and this is where the conversation totally derails. I've never seen it.
Inigo Montoya. None of it means anything to Jemele.
Kill my father.
So I did not get any
Prepare
of that
to die.
reference, but okay.
You called her the nice race lady, which is demoting her from the resident race lady, which is now her new title at Metal
The friendly neighborhood race lady. Excuse me. She's like Spider-Man.
Friendly neighborhood race lady.
But how about this team, Jemele, as not unlike the Colorado Buffalo when we were early in the season, as a symbol for black excellence that is interesting in sports because it's going to be something that makes people uncomfortable. Like what Lamar Jackson is doing back there is artistry of the highest order.
Well, that's quite a comparison. Although clearly I knew that this conversation was headed this way, hence why I have this T-shirt on right now. But this is the thing about the Ravens in particular. When the height of their success before with Ray Lewis, they were like a Black America's team then too. So that like the Ravens have been a black team for a long time. Lamar Jackson just adds a special punctuation to the blackness. And here's the thing about black excellence. And a friend of mine pointed this out, Lovey Ajayi Jones, who's a wonderful author, friend of mine, noted thinker. And she had this very eloquent sort of thought about black excellence. Like we hear all the time, black excellence, black girl magic. And the thing about the excellence, though, is that the excellence isn't the deodorant for the inevitable undermining of black excellence. So like, no matter how excellent Lamar Jackson is, that's not going to stop somebody like the woman Pablo cited, who wrote that letter to the Charlotte Observer. That's not going to shut the naysayers down. I promise you, we will be back to the conversation about what kind of quarterback is he very soon. And that's where while we can enjoy the black excellence and we can certainly highlight it and amplify it, we also have to understand we cannot outachieve some of the sometimes racially attitudes that tend to temper what we're seeing. But for the moment, I think we just need to enjoy that this is a phenomenal quarterback. This team, the Ravens, I don't want any parts of them. If I'm any team in the NFL, I mean, they have separated themselves from every team in the NFL. And so I'm just going to enjoy that part of it and try not to fall into the trap of saying like, oh, black excellence, this means X, this means Y. It means that we're seeing something really good. And unfortunately, a lot of the stupider conversations about race that we've had around it will always find its way back into the conversation.
Pablo, I wanted to ask you about what is happening right now at ESPN and at Disney, where you have Jimmy Kimmel going after Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is being paid by Pat McAfee a lot of money. I remember at ESPN having pretty enormous fights just trying to keep Ron McGill, the animal guy, on the air at ESPN. And I've got to imagine as ESPN is no commenting stuff around Aaron Rodgers because he's linking Disney's biggest talk show host to the Epstein Island in a way that's making Jimmy Kimmel come back at him, not with jokes, but threatening legal action because he doesn't want to be put near the Epstein list. What kind of problem here does ESPN and Disney have on its hand that, and Jemele, you could speak to this too, you've got employees going back and forth in what was supposed to be a zone that didn't include this stuff?
I've been marveling at the way in which people who work at ESPN still, like Stephen A., when they're not at ESPN on air, can basically pivot to a certain horniness that was once unthinkable on Disney airwaves. And I praise the pivot to horniness, Jemele. I'll be honest. Like, I'm clicking on those videos. The evolution of Stephen A. Love Doctor. I'm like, all right, where does he rank Latinas? I want to find out. I'll admit it. Now, that said, when it comes to what's on the air itself, this feels like a certain Rubicon being crossed, insofar as I don't know how internet brained you have to be to do the thing that Elon Musk managed to get away with, perhaps because he bought the platform upon which he said it, which is, oh, that guy's a pedophile. Like, that was remember like the Thai cave diver guy who was like helping save the kids stuck in the cave or whatever? Like, he got away with that. I just wonder if Aaron Rodgers is just at this point where he's like not even thinking that this is insane and legally actionable, and also on a network that I just hate. Okay, can I just fast forward a bit to like the news cycle here? I preemptively want to say how much I hate how Aaron Rodgers is going to claim to be canceled because he accused Jimmy Kimmel of being a pedophile on his employer's own airwaves. I just hate that. Aaron Rodgers has been getting away with so much stuff that puts such a lie to the whole idea of like the MSM, the elite media. Like, Aaron Rodgers has whatever the hell he wants every Tuesday on the most mainstream sports channel. And now, because he crossed this Rubicon, I feel like he's going to be a victim again. And I just hate that this is going to get there inevitably.
No, I think that's the inevitable conclusion, because listen, if you're Jimmy Kimmel, who do you think Jimmy Kimmel called after or what's this news broke? Bob Iger, perhaps? Okay.
Perhaps.
And what's going to happen? I don't know that for sure. So, I don't want to see some reports that she said he called, that it was factual. But like, I'm just thinking, knowing how the internal politics work at ESPN, at Disney, at ABC, we know he made a call. All right. So that means that once they get the emperor involved in Bob Iger, then this is when this goes to another level. This is when this goes to that conclusion that we're inevitably going to get to, that you talked about, Pablo, because ESPN or someone is going to have to rein this in. And we know there's no more offensive crime in the universe of ESPN and Disney than host-on-host crime or talent-on-talent crime. There is no bigger offense ask Tony Kornheiser and Hannah Storm. Like, there is no bigger thing. I experienced some of this myself when me and Chris Berman got into it behind the scenes, and that escalated, to a certain level of executiveness. And so we know how this happens. And so I just have a feeling that is when these conversations are totally going to get out of hand about what Aaron Rodgers is or isn't allowed to say. And there's a part of me that wonders if is this going to be the end of the weekly Aaron Rodgers appearances? Maybe not right now in the moment, but looking on down the line, at some point, I guess if you're ABC or ESPN or those people who get paid to make these decisions, you wonder, is it worth it to have him on if every week there is going to be some kind of headline of him saying something and us making news for the wrong reasons?
You guys say news for the wrong reasons, but the three faces talking right now on this camera can make the argument that they have been turned into political weapons for their sports opinions and now no longer work at ESPN, even though Pablo still does some stuff at ESPN. So when you guys say Jimmy Kimmel makes a call to Iger, my immediate thought is, and McAfee tells his audience how, that Disney's not going to change the show he promised them wasn't going to change at all. When Iger gets involved after changing the entire landscape there to pay the McAfees of the world $17 million to not have to answer to anybody because he's his own entity paying his own employee. It's not even Disney money that's going to Aaron Rodgers. Pat McAfee tore up a deal bigger than ours, a $120 million deal to go to ESPN, get less money, but get the platform with the promise that they would not change that show. How can he argue? I couldn't argue to my audience that I wasn't going to change the Miami show if I got rid of the animal guy. That's the animal guy. That's that's Ron McGill. Like, think about what we're talking about there. How does Pat McAfee tell his audience this isn't going to change when Iger's making that phone call?
Right. I mean, look, this is, by the way, there's a poetry in this story, right? Just as a media story. And this is now playing out the hypothetical in which Pat McAfee has to reckon with a heat check that backfired and exploded the platform that he made those trade-offs to be on, Dan. The poetry here is in this. What if the reason Pat McAfee got the platform, which is Aaron Rodgers almost specifically, right? Like, nothing cut through more than Aaron Rodgers being on Pat McAfee's show for Pat McAfee. That was the biggest win that elevated him, transcended him into this rarefied territory where he can do all these things. If that same guy ends up being the reason why something material changes about his license to have a freedom of speech that I don't think any other person in the history of the network has ever enjoyed. Like, let's just be clear about what he's been getting away with. And again, I don't begrudge it because I'm not scandalized by it. I've just been noticing it in the way that all of us can notice what we were allowed to say and what we weren't. It would be incredible if that is the reason why. If Rodgers is the reason for his rise and his fall in that way.
Well, to Dan's point, though, is that you know they knew what they were getting into, and I don't mean to suggest that like Pat McAfee is some kind of nefarious character. I enjoy him, and frankly, I think it is good for the network that he's there because
Sure.
I like the fact that they are opening up. Do I wish this would have happened more when I was there? Of course I do, but I still think it's a necessary step. In terms of them getting out of their own way and developing and growing in terms of how they want to relate to their audience. But at the same time, though, there is Jimmy Kimmel, if he wanted to, could force them into an awfully uncomfortable decision. Because frankly, I'm just putting myself in Jimmy Kimmel's shoes. And if it were me and one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time went on the ESPN airwaves and essentially linked me to a horrific case of sex trafficking involving a completely nefarious figure, I would not rest until he was off the air. And so that's the tension point that I'm seeing developing, is that this could turn really ugly. And I just don't know if simply telling Pat McAfee or telling Aaron Rodgers, hey, no problem with how you guys generally do your business, but you're going to have to chill out. And how does that conversation, to Dan's point, given that Pat McAfee has already made the promise to his audience that he won't change, and you know how stubborn Aaron Rodgers is, how is that going to play out and how will they receive that message? So, I just see a lot of combustible elements in this dynamic.
Well, I just one more thing, though. I think part of the behind-the-scenes ecosystem that's worth pointing out here, too, is that the question is whether you as a host of this show that has great real estate, and I'm with you, Jemele, in terms of I am in favor of being able to say a lot more than what was previously allowed, right? I am not begrudging that. That is a good thing. I don't think anybody is, I am not at least angry at oh no, Pat McAfee can talk about non-sports stuff for a really long time. That's not it. But the question to me is whether you actually see yourself as an ESPN employee as a teammate of everyone else who's a full-time employee at the Disney properties. Because that's the whole thing. You walk into Disneyland, we all did this. They say, hello, cast member, right? As if you're hanging out with Goofy. And in this case, the question is, do you actually live up to the implications of that when it comes to that internecine sort of warfare that Jemele was alluding to?
Let's take it to the center of the culture wars, though. Pat McAfee doesn't actually need ESPN. He does not. And if he is paying Aaron Rodgers millions of dollars because Aaron Rodgers got him 500,000 people on YouTube, and he believes that's the reason he's a $500 million company now. McAfee is not powerless here. McAfee can actually turn this into a freedom fight that makes him even more popular for leaving ESPN as well. Like, this can escalate. If he values Aaron Rodgers as a teammate and friend enough to give him millions of dollars in a way that he was pissed off at the New York Post, called the reporter a rat because ESPN leaked to the New York Post the information reportedly, this is what McAfee is upset about, that allegedly, right? Now I need to say that because McAfee was upset because he felt like someone at ESPN had betrayed him with that information. He called the reporter a rat. If all of that is in play, why do you guys think Kimmel has more power here than McAfee?
Well, it's almost like, well, Jemele, I'm curious what you think, but it's almost like if you're inside of this universe, then yes, Jimmy Kimmel has more power. If you decide, and you mentioned it, Dan, I think it's a brilliant point. If Pat McAfee wants to go hypothetically and say, because my freedom of speech has been compromised, I'm going to go to a platform where I have no censorship restrictions at all, that is a very savvy move that would result in, again, the Patreoning, the OnlyFansing, the everybody is hustling independently from a creator to consumer to a fandom dynamic that we're familiar with. And it'd be very profitable. No question. I think it would actually increase his profile if he said, I don't want to be on the field at, these games, these college football playoff games. I'd rather monetize that philosophy. Then yeah, there is even more money in that, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, look, I didn't mean to make the assumption, or not the assumption, but make the assertion rather, that Pat McAfee has no power. I mean, he has a lot of cards. He has a lot of leverage. Hence why he's even in this position to begin with. But I think this is kind of one of those worst fears realized when you have two extremely popular, gigantic personalities who now have beef. And that is a very difficult situation to manage. And it's because of what they have beef over. I think it's the subject matter that matters. Like, if this were something a little more frivolous, if this were something that like he could laugh off, I got to be honest, even if it was another COVID conspiracy, they would probably be fine, right? That would be way better than being linked to pedophilia.
On that note, we welcome in Mike Schur because he was scheduled to join us now, and surely he has opinions on this subject matter as well. Mike, I just want to include you in the conversation without being redundant here, because we're talking about what I think is pretty fascinating here. Aaron Rodgers now feuding with Jimmy Kimmel at the height of sports entertainment, and the comedian is not making any jokes, and the comedian is saying publicly, hey, I'm going to take you to court for affiliating me with any of this. I'm interested in sort of the micro mechanics of how the power dynamics are going to work on whether or not McAfee and Aaron Rodgers are going to stay at ESPN. But what was your initial reaction to seeing this clip? Because a lot of people have a lot of opinions of everything Aaron Rodgers is doing these days.
Well, every year, if you work in TV, a lawyer comes to talk to you and says, like, here's what you can do and here's what you can't do. And not a joke, the number one example of a thing you can't do is assert that someone is a pedophile if they're not a pedophile. It's the number one example that they use. And so as soon as I saw this, I was like, this is over. Like, Jemele just made the point, but like, there's a lot of things you can get away with of insinuating or whatever you want to call it, making a joke about someone and how they live their life. You cannot say someone's a pedophile. It's just absolutely verboten. And that's why Kimmel isn't making jokes about this. It's like, this isn't a joke. This is essentially the worst thing you can say about someone. And so I don't care how much power McAfee has. I don't care how much Aaron Rodgers talks about freedom of speech, which, like most things, he doesn't seem to really actually understand what that means. You can't do that. And so this is going to end. I would be shocked if this had legs from Aaron or Pat's side, because you are exposing yourself not just to legal liability, but to all sorts of things if you claim what he is claiming. And I don't know that they're going to walk it back necessarily, because those two guys aren't really in the walk it back business as far as I know, but this is not going to go any further, and because it would be the height of stupidity for them to press this issue or to try to turn this into some kind of freedom fight. And by the way, yeah, McAfee could leave. Obviously, he could leave. He had left before and was a huge success. He took a pay cut to go back to ESPN. But I don't think he would leave and then have Rodgers on to talk about this more either, because he's then personally liable for whatever happens after that. So I think this is going to be over very quickly, and not just because of the corporate dynamics at play, but because the thing that Rodgers did is the stupidest possible thing you can do as an individual. And so I think it's over. That's my guess.
You say that, but I feel in what are American culture wars these days publicly that I keep thinking it can't get dumber, and it keeps getting dumber from every angle. Am I wrong about this? Like you say,
no.
I can see all sorts things I never thought I would see argued out loud in my lifetime. Things that are now facts that get argued about, even though they're facts. Somebody help me here with, as Jemele, as Mike says, yeah, it's the dumbest thing you can do. But here they are in the center of it, and they're not commenting. And you and me, Jemele, have been at the center of ESPN not commenting. There is so much going on behind the scenes right now, including Pat McAfee not totally trusting that people who leak things to the New York Post to shame him are actually supporting him and his friend Aaron Rodgers, neither of whom need or necessarily like what Disney's about.
Well, to your point about us arguing about things you never thought we'd argue about out loud, we're still arguing about the cause of the Civil War. So I'm just saying, like, Dan's not wrong, okay? Not wrong at all. And for the record, it was slavery.
We're not so much, to be fair, we're not so much arguing about it as we are just sometimes not mentioning it or pretending that it's something else. Like that, there's a difference, I think, between, there are people certainly who argue about it, but there's people who are solicitous of a certain electorate slice who just kind of don't mention that it or pretend that it wasn't what it was.
Yeah, at the beginning of every GOP debate, someone walks into the back room and says, so the number one thing you can't talk about is how the Civil War was over slavery. Just don't do that. Everything else,
Jessica is presently right now listening to the McAfee Show on her phone.
Can't believe you're making me listen to this.
I'm sorry I'm doing that to you. What can you update us on as we do this in real time? And what has he had to do publicly here? Because this isn't going to just stop here with whatever it is that's happened today. There's going to have to be an accounting for whether Aaron Rodgers stays on that show.
Jessica has multiple phones she's staring at.
I'm on 5 devices right now. It's very hard to concentrate. The quote that Awful Announcing posted, which is they posted a 3-minute video. This is basically the gist of the entire video. Was I can see exactly why Jimmy Kimmel felt the way he felt, especially with his position. But I think Aaron was just trying to talk some.
Your Honor,
that's a legal defense. Yeah,
my client was just trying to talk some.
Well,
I have a theory. Can I say what my theory is about this?
So after Iger makes calls and we've got posturing from powerful people, the way that this ends is, we were just talking.
Over and out.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I say what my theory is about this?
Yes.
I think that Aaron Rodgers, this is based on nothing. I think that Aaron Rodgers feels like maybe his career should have gone better and that he should have more Super Bowl victories. And he's just like sad that it's ending. And I honestly feel like if Mike McCarthy had been a slightly better coach, or if what's his name, Ted Thompson had been a slightly better GM, none of this would be happening. Like if Aaron Rodgers had 3 Super Bowl rings, none of this would be happening.
Juju, put it on the poll, please, at LeBatard Show. Did Aaron Rodgers go crazy politically because of Mike McCarthy? Yes or no?
Was he radicalized?
Yeah.
I mean, what an odd theory. And
Such a good take.
By the lack of winning.
Your best take, Mike.
Yeah.
Jessica
Tracks.
and Jeremy are totally in agreement with what it is that you're saying, that this is just him saying to himself, I was just as good as Tom Brady.
He's sad.
I think
He's so sad.
He's a very sad person, it seems.
Yeah. He's just like desperate to be like relevant or loved. Like Tom Brady probably has the same degree of right-wing politics that Aaron Rodgers has, but he just is more content because he's got 7 Super Bowl rings. So he doesn't need this like googly-eyed acolyte like chanting his name and telling him he's a genius and then he's important. So Aaron Rodgers hasn't gotten that to the degree he needs it from football. So he's getting it from the worst people on like 8chan or whatever, and people who buy like Rudy Giuliani commemorative plates off of an ad on Newsmax at 3 a.m. Like that's all this is. It's just like a desperate need for that like love and attention that he didn't get enough of.
Jessica,
I wish I would have rooted for him then. I wish I would have rooted for him to win more Super Bowls. None of us need to be subjected to this.
I wish that Jemele and Pablo had seen what happened in the shipping container right there, because what Chris Cody heard was radicalization by Dolphins running back Devon Achane. That's what he heard, not 8chan.
Not 8chan.
No.
I was like, is he playing Sunday? What do you know?
Jeremy, you wanted to speak to somebody here.
No, I mean, I just think that the thing with Rodgers, we're talking about how sad he is. Like, if your very sad friend then went to go take a bunch of ayahuasca and psychedelic drugs to try to fix their sadness, and then came out of that with a bunch of wild conspiracies about COVID and the pedophiles running the United States government and entertainment and all of that, you would be concerned for them, not trying to give them a bigger platform. Like, this is genuinely, if this was just a normal human being and not the guy that we've built up to be, Jeopardy host, intelligent Aaron Rodgers, we would be worried about this guy.
Maybe if he got to be the host of Jeopardy, he never would have accused Jimmy Kimmel of being a pedophile.
I like this. I like that theory too.
Yep.
There's a lot of people in the country who this happens to, right? It's like they're lonely and they're scared and they're feeling their mortality and they're isolated and they don't have a lot of friends and they become vulnerable to conspiracy theories and nonsense. It's just that most of those people are like in their mid to late 80s, and Aaron Rodgers is like 38 or whatever, and that's why it's and rich. And so, like, I feel like a lot of us have seen this happen to our parents or our grandparents. It just doesn't usually happen to, like, a very famous, handsome, rich quarterback.
I have a take also about Aaron Rodgers that this all reminds me of, which is that Aaron Rodgers talks, and so my most sympathy I have for Aaron Rodgers is when he talks about, like, psychedelics and psychedelic therapy. I believe that is a worthwhile thing that America has been very late to, and that the science actually is far more compelling than people give it credit for on elite media channels and the MSM. However, I also think when Aaron Rodgers talks about how, like, the consequences, the benefits of, like, ayahuasca are ego death and this recentering of yourself and how you now place yourself in the larger universe and you have perspective on things. My general response is, I think he needs to do more ayahuasca. Like, I don't think he did enough.
So do more. It's not that he did so much that it sent him down this other path. It's that he needs to do more.
Didn't do enough. Like, he didn't actually get high, but he thought he did. And it's like, oh, he got none of the benefits that he's preaching about. And he doesn't realize it yet. So just do more ayahuasca, baby. That would be my recommendation. My resolution.
It's like he did placebo ayahuasca. he thought he was getting something out of it, but it was just nutmeg.
I am going to stop you guys for a moment on ayahuasca shaming, as it is something that I have noticed other people that have been seeking something have derived healing from what is the killing of the ego and DMT and some of those. What do you, Mike Schur? What is it that you're trying to get in on there?
You're making Pablo's point. Pablo's saying he should do it more, not he shouldn't do it. It's not shaming. It's like encouragement.
It sounded like Jeremy.
Let me
also say, I'm not trying to. No, I'm not shaming. I'm saying that there are plenty of people who go down that path that the wrong thing happens and that they end up hooked to whatever type of drug experiences that they have there. I just watched like the Love Has Won documentary of all of these people who basically, one woman who took all of these psychedelic drugs and then believed that she was God. And then all of these other people who followed that path.
She turned blue.
And then she turned blue. I would love to know what Aaron Rodgers thinks of colloidal silver. That's what I'm trying to say, is I just want to know what he thinks about that.
Okay, understood. Thank you for your viewpoints on this. You did ayahuasca shame, and it was unnecessary.
I really didn't mean to. I really did.
But you did. And it's whether you meant
if your friend did this and then came to you.
That's right. That's correct.
How crazy would you think they are?
These are his
slow down, McGruff the crime dog. Jeez.
These are his 8th grade friends. He's very concerned for them.
It actually is.
Give us the stat of the day music here. I want to bring Jemele back in, and I want to get rid of Mike Schur, but he's got his stat of the day at his appointed time. Let's do it.
I'm going to do that right now. Let's do that in 5.
He was just yelling.
You're
1.
not listening.
Start of the day, start of the day. It is your start of the day. Start of the day, start of the day. It is your start of the day. Start of the day, start of the day. It is your start of the day. Start of the day, start of the day. It is your start of the day.
In Chris Cody's defense, how could he have known I was going to do a stat of the day? You know?
Zagaki.
I have a couple stats for you. I have a football stat and a basketball stat. Here's your football stat. My beloved New England Patriots have scored 233 points this year. Josh Allen has scored 252 points this year. The Patriots, by the way, averaged 14.6 points per game. And Lucy's beloved Iowa Hawkeyes averaged 15.4. The Patriots are underscoring Iowa.
Wow. Excellent stat work. We have missed you during the holidays. You have more than that.
I do. Here's a basketball stat. This is from OptaStats to give you some idea of Caitlin Clark's dominance. There have been 2 players in the last 25 years in the NBA, WNBA, Division I men's or Division I women's teams to put up the following numbers over a 15-game span. At least 450 points, at least 100 rebounds, at least 100 assists, and a 900 winning percentage. There have been 2 people at any level, men's or women's, who have done that. One of them is Caitlin Clark over her last 15 games. The other one is LeBron James. That's it.
What she did yesterday is totally absurd. A step back,
Insane.
40-footer at the, after the buzzer. After the buzzer. But
No, she got it off. It was she had a 1/10 of a second left.
Boo, hiss.
No, well, it doesn't matter. They need to allow it whether she got it off or not.
Yeah, it's the cool rule. If it's cool enough, you got to let it go.
Thank you, Mike. We will talk to you again at some appointed time when Chris Cody will forget that you do the stat of the day around here as our intern. Now I've got to go back to talking to our resident race lady. Thank you. We appreciate the time. Jemele, I wanted to ask you, I've only seen the first 10 minutes of the new Chappelle special, and I just immediately became disappointed because he's again doing the thing where he wants the last word on this. And even though I appreciate the artistry of stand-up, of signaling Norm Macdonald, of telling a story that has a punchline at the end that surprises you, I want to play for you Jerry Seinfeld talking to Stephen Colbert about Bill Cosby, and then just get your thoughts on how it is that we are to separate the art from the artist.
Who was the comedian for you? Was there
Well,
a
the
person?
comedian was Bill Cosby.
Of course.
Those albums, I had
Very
never
funny
heard.
fellow, right? Wonderfulness.
Why Is There Air?
Uh-huh.
Greatest, what's the word? Body of work.
Mm-hmm.
I think in comedy is his.
Can you still listen to his comedy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I grew up on his stuff. Like, I think he saved my life.
Right.
Because when I was a kid, I had like a tragedy in my life, but for the next 2 years, I listened to Bill Cosby albums every night before going to bed. I would hide the speaker under my pillow so my mom wouldn't hear that I was listening to Cosby every night. You could drop a needle anywhere on those albums, and yet I can't listen to it now.
No.
I just
you can't.
I can't separate it.
You can't separate it.
I can't.
Well, to me, it's
Because there's love there. There's love.
Yeah,
there's love there.
yeah. I know it's tragic.
Yeah.
But comedy, there's a lot of tragedy in comedy.
There's comedy because of tragedy.
But I mean, there's a lot of people who have tragic lives.
Sure.
Well, like the Jerry Lewis thing. You read the thing that he didn't include any of his sons in the will. Did you see that item?
I did see that, yeah.
Now, how did you feel about that?
Kind of hilarious. Yeah. But that's not like, he denied the money. That's not the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing.
A roofie.
See, that upset me, because I adore Jerry Lewis, but I'm not going to not watch The Bellboy. I'm still going to watch The Nutty Professor. We need the comedy.
Sailor Beware. One of the funniest movies ever made.
Heard of that?
You never saw Sailor Beware with Jerry Lewis?
No.
Seinfeld is a colder person. He is not as spiritual as Colbert. I am surprised that Seinfeld, Jemele, was totally surprised, as if he'd never considered the idea that somebody would get so emotionally attached to something that they couldn't separate art from artist. It seems like Seinfeld hadn't considered the possibility because he loves the art of stand-up and joke telling so much, and so many comedians will protect comedy above all.
Yeah, so much of this is about how it makes you feel, right? Because there are certain things that there's levels to this. There's certain things that you might be able to bypass, because I think most of the people that we like, we admire, that we listen to, whose entertainment we consume, I would say over half of them are probably problematic. Now, they're problematic in different ways. And, somebody who may have gotten a DUI is not going to hit you the same as somebody who was accused of raping and drugging women. But I don't remember who made this point. And it was a brilliant point, so I'm going to steal it, and I'm going to pretend like I was smart enough to come up with it on my own. But here's the thing about Cosby. The Cosby Show comes on every day, and I watch it, and I don't really have a problem with watching it. But I was trying to understand how it is possible. Like, I cannot hear an R. Kelly song. I had one rule for my wedding: don't play any R. Kelly. All right, like I can't do it. Right. The difference is, Bill Cosby was a character on the Cosby Show, right? He was playing somebody else. Like, he wasn't really an obstetrician. Like, we knew this. Like, there was nothing about there was some parts about his life, like him being known as this family man. I guess you could say that. But, like, it was so fictional to the point, like, I don't really relate the two. The difference is with R. Kelly is that he was literally singing about his crimes. Show me some ID before we get knee deep. He was singing about it all the time. So, like, you can't listen to it because you're like, no, he's reminding me all the time he's a creep and he deserves to be in prison. So I think to some degree we have to do this. Otherwise, we would never enjoy anything. But I do understand why there are certain people who are going to turn you off and certain people who want. Like, I'm at the point with Dave Chappelle where Dave Chappelle doesn't turn me off necessarily, but I haven't given one thought to watching this special. And the last one, more than anything, because he has just decided to make going after and talking about the transgender community his thing, that is so boring to me that it's hard for me to watch him from that standpoint. He's not saying anything revolutionary. He's just sort of taking a grievance, I think, to the point of where it's undermining his intellect as a comedian.
Yeah, my take on all of this is that I actually perversely really enjoy when someone that I know intellectually I should not like or enjoy or consume is so good that they make me guiltily still want to enjoy it or want to watch or want to laugh, right? Like, that's the entire calculus we all make about, like, the art versus the artist. I'm okay with everybody separating it according to their own personal standards. It's all about your personal feelings, right? I'm not here to legislate that. Go do what you want in the privacy of your own brain. But my thing with Chappelle now is just that he reminds me of Patrick Ewing in a Orlando Magic jersey. I'm just like, dude, I am here for you to guilt me into wanting to laugh. But every time I see it, it feels like Joe Montana with the Chiefs. It's just like you don't have your fastball. And it feels like it's more exacerbated because you keep on playing these hobby horses that are going to get a certain reaction from people that feels like the easiest possible layup. And for a guy who is killing me, look, his previous specials, his show, genius, right? Like, and even some of the early stuff when he was trying to, like, weave in the trans stuff, you sort of had to, like, it made you stop for a second and have to think hard about, like, man, what do I think about Chappelle now? Now, today in 2024, I don't have to do that calculus anymore because I'm just like, yeah, this isn't that good. Sorry, it feels boring. It feels lazy. And I wish it wasn't, because I'm here to be guilted into laughter. I really am. There are comedians that I do that for still. Shane Gillis, I know is a problematic guy, but who's hilarious. Chappelle, not doing it for me, even though my brain is open quietly to the possibility.
We're out of time, unfortunately, but the argument on the other side would be that he is fearlessly saying things that others aren't saying in comedy and has the #1 Netflix special, at least in part because he's doing that. We can say what we're saying, and people will accuse us of our politics skewing his funny. Thank you for being on with us, guys.
Yeah.